let me explain how I'm drawing this castle. I'm drawing it directly in ink using a 0.2 millimeter fine liner pen. Now, I start by choosing the simplest area to draw, which I think is going to be this corner tower, and I'm going to use that to help me get the proportions going as accurately as I can, and particularly the fact that we've got a number of cylinders marked off by some of the architectural moulding here. And that's going to help me get the proportions correct. You're watching me draw this in actual time. This is the speed it took me to draw it. And again, I put that cone on the top and I'm paying attention at the proportions. I don't want it to be too short and fat or too high and skinny. Now, when we're drawing, it's important to get the angles as correct as we can. And one thing I want to say is that the speed of this drawing is slower at this point than it will be in the second half. I have certainly less than half of my drawing done when half the time is up. And that's because I've got to take a little more time, since I can't erase any of these marks, to go light, but also to try and just put some marks that help me visualize what the angle is going to be like. And sometimes I use my pen on the paper to help me see the angle more clearly so that I can compare it with the angle in my reference. And you can see that I'm doing that top section of the corner tower and the windows that go down alongside it. Once I think I've got my angles correct, now I can start to add the detail. Really important thing here, as a wall moves away from us, as this one does, things are going to get smaller. They're going to get shorter, but they're also going to get narrower. And so as these windows move along, if we look first in the reference, if we compare the first and the last one, we can see that the last window is less than half the width of the first one. And I find that comparing first and last is a really helpful way to see just how much I need to shrink the size as I move down the wall. The other thing to realize is that it's not just the objects such as windows that get narrower, but it's things such as the gaps between the windows that get narrower as well. So I'm moving fairly quickly down. Now this is a quick sketch. This is going to be not a perfectly tightly finished scene. I'm using lots of, in my mind, approximating marks to draw this scene, but I need to get the angles correct for the perspective, or it will just look unnatural, just look as though it's not real. The other thing to notice is that all of these diagonal lines, as they move upwards, the angle increases. And they really create, if we were to take them down to the left to where they would join up at some point, they would all create a wedge shape. So it's this fan pattern that's important. Now, as we move down the side of the castle, we're going to see that these angled lines at one point become horizontal or near horizontal. The horizontal point is the eye level, and then the angle starts to increase again, but in the other direction. So I'm now establishing the second section of the wall, putting these windows in, as you can see. Second section, and now I've got to work out how much further. Now, it looks like it's a little bit less than that top section. And now I have another angle of line here to establish. I've got the top of these windows and that's where I've got just a real, that very faint line. And then I have another line, which is the tops of the columns between these arched or lancet windows, I think they are. And again, notice that the gaps between the columns on each side of these windows become closer and closer together as they move further away. So it's really getting these patterns correct, which is crucial. If my windows are a bit taller or a bit shorter at the end of the day, that's not going to be noticeable to anyone who's not comparing my drawing with the original photo. But if I've not done that, if I've got the angles not right, that will look odd if the perspective isn't fitting the pattern of this fan shape moving up. And you can see I find this very helpful when I do a scene where there's architectural elements that repeat along the wall, is to do all the same thing at once, because I want all of these to look as identical as I can. And when I go down the line, so to speak, I also make sure I do them with the same type of marks, the same direction and the same speed all at once. And that helps them end up looking very much the same, changing the direction, changing the order, not quite starting and finishing lined up correctly. All of that can make what's meant to have the feel of identical repetition much less effective. And now I'm coming to one of the bottom lines here, and there is some foliage here. Now I'm not going to fuss with the foliage too much because this is a quick sketch. I'm just going to do a bit of indicative line work for that foliage. We really want to get the architecture done. And I have the same thing. Now there is another tower, round tower, that sits further down. And I can align this with what I've already drawn. So I look to see where these things, details I'm putting now, line up with the wall that I have drawn. And now putting these castellations in. And you can see I did put one line in there that I'm just crossing through now that I shouldn't have. I just got a bit confused as to what I hadn't drawn. Don't give it a moment's thought. It's not going to be obvious at the end. So now I do that tower, and I'm very aware when I do the tower that if I look at my photo and I draw a line between the tops of those two towers, that line needs to follow the same fan-shaped pattern that's been getting higher and higher as it moves up. And now I just have a small amount of the wall to keep doing on the other side of the tower. And this time I actually looked at the width of that wall in a horizontal line from the tower, put that width in, and now I'm just going to fill the gaps in. And I'm doing my best to keep those marks looking as close to what I've already done as is possible. Please hit the like button if you're finding this interesting, and I'll post this photo on my channel community page. It's called the post page now, so if you'd like to have a go drawing this yourself, why not? And now, time to go down the other side of the building. Again, I need to slow down a little bit because I need to establish these angles. I need to establish the widths. Now, notice that I put dots to help me position where this architectural element is going to be. And I try and visualize that at the same time. Here I go again. Now the angle has to flatten a little bit as it comes down lower, but not that much. If I put a line that's not in the right place, I prefer to put a line that I think is more accurately placed over the top of it, because for someone looking at my drawing, their brain will want to focus on the more correct line, and therefore the one that's out of alignment won't be as obvious. So now, you'll notice what I'm doing. Often we end up drawing things, particularly when they're fairly small, at this distance, we draw the shadows more than we draw the things. And with windows, there are often shadows on one side of the depth of the indent from the wall, where the other features of the window sit. And we have to allow, when we draw things such as the window framing within the window cavity in the wall, that we allow for the fact that often we see more of one side than the other side. And so something that is actually in the middle of the window, if we look straight at it, really ends up being off-center at the angle. Now there's a downpipe there which I'm putting in, and I put that in particularly because it helps me position now these windows. And again, I've got to bear in mind that they're going to become taller and wider as they move towards me, and narrower and shorter as they move away. So I'm trying to keep that pattern the same. What do you think? Now there's this bit of a tree sticking out from down the far end, the far corner. So I'm doing that and just adding a little more darkness here to give a little bit of contrast, but I'm really not so fussed with getting this foliage part in any more detail than I've got here. And then there's just a few more details on the roof, I think, I hope. And we're just about done. What do you think? Do you think you might have a go? Why not? It's a great little study for two-point perspective and for creating the effect of the architecture without drawing all of the detail precisely. If we can get our angles nice and tight and accurate, if we get our foreshortening, the narrowing of things as they move away, correct, as well as our fan-shaped angles, and if we just get the effect of the ink, if we have some parts that look a bit darker than others, that often reflects how things look in life. And I think that's it. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Hope you found this step-by-step drawing helpful. Why not have a go drawing it yourself? But whatever you draw, however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.